Got it.
Share the screen. Is that big enough? Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, Parshat Re'eh. It is scary how quickly we're going through Devarim, Sefer Devarim. This week we're going to bench Rosh Chodesh Elul, and you know what that means. So anyway, Re'eh is another really rich parsha, and I wanted to explore one idea, really just one word, and see what it might mean for us. So we're going to begin source number 1. Let me make sure the English is on your screen. This is describing the Ir Hanidachat. A wayward city, or I forget what the fancy English term for
Different
it
way
is.
of saying it.
Cities of refuge? Is that?
No, not a city of refuge. This is a city, that that has worshipped idolatry. And has to be completely destroyed. With all of its inhabitants. Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting discussion. This is perhaps, according to many, one of those things that is lo haya, never was and never will be. This is a theoretical conversation, according to most. But the Torah tells us as follows. Ki tishma ba'achat arecha asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha lashevet sham limor. If you hear in one of the cities which God gives you to settle, Yatsu anashim b'nei Blial mikirbecha, v'yadichu et yoshvei Iram, lemor ne'ocha v'na'avda Elohim achirim asher lo yedatem. Some scoundrels from among you have gone and subverted the inhabitants of their town, saying, "Come, let us worship other gods whom you do not know." V'darashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta hetev, v'hinei emet nachon hadavar, na'asta ha'toiva hazot b'kirbecha. You should investigate very well, and if you find that it is true that this thing was done, that this abomination was done in your midst. Haket yoshvei ha'ir hahi lefi cherev. Hacharem ota v'et kol asher ba v'et behemta lefi charev. You must strike all the inhabitants of that city by sword and destroy everything that is in it and all of the animals. Vet kol shlala tikbot el toch rechova v'sarafta ba'esh. Et ha'ir vet kol shalala kalil laHashem Elokecha. V'tatel olam lo tibane od. All of these spoils should be gathered in the middle of the street of the city, and you shall burn the city and all of its bounty, all of its spoils, entirely to Hashem. It shall remain as a tell, as a mound, an undeveloped mound of earth. Lo yidbak biyadcha me'uma min hacherem leman yashuv Hashem mecharon apo v'natan lecha rachamim v'richamcha v'harbecha ka'asher nishbal avotecha. Nothing shall be in your hands from the spoils, in order that God should turn away from his anger and have compassion upon you, and cause you to multiply as he swore to your ancestors. Ki tishma b'kol Hashem Elokecha lishmor et kol mitzvotav asher anochi mitzavcha hayom lasot hayashar b'einei Hashem Elokecha. Because you have listened to the voice of God to observe all of his commandments, which I command you today, to do that which is straight in the eyes of the Hashem, your God. Okay, so pretty extreme punishment, pretty extreme description of what we have to do to this city. Does anything initially jump out at you in the Torah's description of this?
Put the inhabitants to the sword.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is one of, right, this is, as I said, many feel this is was never actualized in history. And this is one of the classic examples of, can there be a mitzvah, a commandment in the Torah which is unethical? right? Or how do we make sense of these seemingly unethical mitzvot? Right. This and Amalek generally get talked about in the same breath. That regard.
Isn't there a rabbinic saying that if even one mezuzah should be found in that town, that the town would be spared?
Could be, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that are done to try to make this something that can never be realized in reality.
Because the contrast is with the Inquisition, where where the guilt is presumed. Here we have to investigate.
Right. So that line always strikes me as quite interesting. V'darashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta hetev v'hine emet nachon hadavar na'estar toivazot b'kirbecha. You must really investigate very thoroughly. And I always read it as you've investigated thoroughly, and oh my gosh, this has really been done. Right. That's at least how it's being described to us. So I wanted to focus tonight on this phrase, Yatsu Anashim B'nei Blial, which is translated here, is that some scoundrels from among you, scoundrels, B'nei Blial, literally B'nei, children or people of Blial. Any thoughts on what Blial might mean?
Well, it comes into English as sons of Belial, although that's kind of archaic by now.
What does sons of Belial mean?
So
No, that's more than I know.
Blial
Worthless fellows.
it doesn't have Hashem's name in it, does it?
No.
At the end,
No.
okay.
Beli
doesn't
means
believe-
without, doesn't it?
Beli means without.
What does aisle mean?
So that's a good question. So Rashi reads it, source number 2. B'nei Blial, Bliol, without a yoke. Sheparku ulo shel makom. They have removed or thrown off the yoke of God. Okay, so Rashi, right, Jeff, you sort of intuited it, that Rashi reads it as a combination of two different words. Beli, without, and he reads it as ol, which means a yoke. We talk about ol mitzvot, ol malchut shemayim, in a more positive sense. So right, they throw off that yoke that's supposed to direct our way of living. Rabbeinu Bachya also reads it as a compound word. Lashon blial, shelo ya'aleh b'mechitzato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The word blial means not capable of rising spiritually to the domain of God. How does he get that from this? So I think he's reading it as, again, a compound. Beli ya'al. What's the verb al? Ayin lamed?
Going up?
Go up.
Ah,
So without capacity of going up. These are spiritual deadheads, I guess we could call them.
oh dear.
And interestingly, the Gemara seems to read it this way as well. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, right, first the Mishnah tells us, Anshei ir hanidachat, ein lahem chelek lo'olam haba. So residents of the idolatrous city have no share in the world to come. Shene'emar yatzu anashim b'nei Blial mikirbecha v'yadichu et yoshvei iram. Right, that is, and quotes our pasuk. Ve'inan nehergim ad sheyu midicheha me'ota ha'ir ume'oto ha'shevet ve'ad sheyudach ruba. Right, and they're only killed if the following conditions are met. The ones enticing them to idolatry must also be residents of that city. It can't be an outsider. And they have to be members of the same tribe. Ve'ad sheyudach ruba, the majority of the city has to become idolatrous. Ve'ad sheyadichua anashim hadichua nashim viktanim, o shudach miuta, o shaya medicha chutza, lo. But if only a minority of the people are enticed, or only some of them, so then they're not judged as an entire city, as the entire community, but each one of them is judged as an individual, which requires 2 witnesses and all the other requirements. The Gemara then, again, in sort of trying to limit the scope of this, Tanu Rabbanan, Yatsu, Hein Velo Shluchin, right? So Yatsu Anashim B'nei Blial, there have been, emerged or came out these scoundrelous people. So it has to be those people and not their messengers. Anashim, In anashim pachot mishtayim, so there has to be at least 2 that are driving everyone towards idolatry. One person, if it's only one person, that wouldn't do it. Anashim velo nashim, only if it's men. If women are leading the rebellion, that also would not qualify it as a ir nidachat. Velo kitanim, and not minors. B'nei Blial. So now our phrase, scoundrels as was translated. Banim sheparku ol shamayim me'otz rehem. This refers to people who have forcibly removed the yoke of heaven from their, I think that should be, mitzav arehem, yes, from their neck. Okay, so just like Rashi read it. Ibn Ezra has perhaps a different interpretation, a different understanding. Ibn Ezra tells us, Blial, shame. Literally, it's a name or a noun. And then some say it's this compound word, like Rashi said. So if it's to be a noun or a name, what's the significance?
It would happen only once.
What do you mean it would happen only once?
You're saying if Bilial
If Blial isn't right, so Yatsu Anashim B'nei Blial. People who are the sons or followers of Blial have come and enticed the rest of the city to worship idolatry.
Well, I was just thinking if there were such a person, then it would happen only once.
If there were such a person whose name is Blial.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be quite a limiting factor to this, right?
Yeah.
It's only going to be an ir nidachat if the person leading the rebellion is named Blial.
Right.
Well, it says, source number 6 says, V'nei Blial are the murderers, the rapists, and the false witnesses. It's like a noun to describe a rasha.
Okay, so let's go to source number 6. This is the JPS commentary, which brings a nice combination of both traditional rabbinic interpretation as well as the predominant academic approaches to the Torah. So Hebrew B'nei Blial, the precise meaning of Blial is uncertain. Various antisocial types are called B'nei Blial, such as murderers and rapists, false witnesses, rebels, corrupt priests, drunks, ingrates, boors, and the selfish. So if that's the case, is Blial a noun or an adjective?
Sounds like a significant
Well,
thing.
except for selfish, those are all nouns,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, it could be. I read that as, sort of immoral people. And these are examples of what the adjective Blial means. But then he says, many scholars think, right, so sorry, keeping with this, many scholars think that Blial is a compound noun consisting of Bli without and not a Ya'al, which refers to some positive quality such as a value or honor.
Mhm.
Thus, B'nai Blial may mean useless or dishonorable men. The question is complicated by the fact that Blial is also used as a term for the netherworld, which calls for quite a different etymology, such as the land from which one does not come up, Bal Ya'al, right? Just very similar to what we saw in the Rabbeinu Bachya, without going up, but not about without spiritual, but I guess being read as sort of an eternal damnation. That B'nai Blial refers to a place from if you go there, you're never getting out.
The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns.
Yeah. Or the swallower, right? Perhaps the etymology is Bala, like when we saw with Korach and his followers that the land swallowed them. This meaning is reflected in Blial, a name of Satan in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the pseudepigrapha, and the Christian scriptures. The two meanings of Blial may be unrelated, and they may be homonyms, but it is conceivable that the term originally meant the netherworld, and that B'nai Blial means denizens of the netherworld, or demons, and then evildoers or scoundrels. Okay, so that might be where the Ibn Ezra is getting that it's a noun, right? That Blial, at least in some sources, seems to be reference to a place, or perhaps what we might in popular terms think of as the devil, though that raises a lot of interesting questions about does the Torah recognize devils as we generally think of the devil?
Satan is recognized because Satan is a malach.
Right, so
Mm.
Satan is recognized, although many read it as sort of the Yetzer Hara, not as a devil or demon as Hollywood depicts it, but as sort of the evil inclination, or just like the force representing bad, I guess we might say.
Is there a presumption in the Torah that God created in the 6 days of creation or before demons?
In the Torah itself, not exactly, meaning there are those who will read it into there. Certainly in rabbinic literature, there is some recognition of angels or other
Malachim
forces.
exist.
Right.
That we know.
Right.
And that's repeated over and over, but they're very special creatures.
Yeah. So they're
more automatons than they are anything else.
Right, but there presumably are malachim for the good and malachim for the bad, or some permutations. That seems to be what the Ibn Ezra might be alluding to.
But angels, at least those created by God, and I don't know about anybody else creating them, but my understanding is that one version is that they are only able to carry out the specific mission that they have been assigned or created for.
Right.
And in fact, that there are 3 malachim sent to visit Avraham because each one had a separate task to take care of. Because and that means that they're limited in function. They're very, very task oriented.
Yeah, so I've definitely seen and read and heard that as well.
There is another,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There is another interpretation also of this word. I do think I'm remembering this correctly. I hope so. By the way, I know Jeff T. Gay.
Okay.
A wonderful guy. I studied at Yale with him in the Ezekiel seminar.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
terrific. He was entirely reliable and a wonderful person. But in the Canaanite class that I took, we often talked about this verb, bala, which if you realize it's pronounced at the beginning of the mouth with the B, and then you go to the lamed, and then you go all the way down to the end. It's one of those special verbs because it produces, by pronouncing it, what it says, you know, that kind of a thing. But my Canaanite teacher, Marvin Pope, always pointed out this word also, which is like a play upon the name of the Canaanite deity. So that's how one might think that this has to do with idolatrous cities.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so this is a reference to something that might happen.
And hold on
when
one
they
second.
come
Let me
into
just let me make
Canaan.
sure. And let me just make sure everyone else is with us. So Anne is saying that Blial, the might be somehow connected to the main god of the Canaanite people, which is Baal.
Exactly.
It's the same letters, right? The
Same letters. They're just in a
same
different
letters,
order.
Bet Lamed Ayin. And also, right, she mentioned that the verb bala, swallow, you know, sort of, I'd never pick up on this stuff, but sort of by the nature of how it's pronounced, makes you go through the act of swallowing.
Exactly.
Right, you
Yeah.
start with the front. And,
Onomatopoeia.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure everyone was with you, Anne. Go keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So that if we are thinking of these special mitzvot that come up in Devarim in the way that they're presented generally as something that is of immediate interest to them as they are entering Canaan, this kind of interpretation makes some sense to me, that we are translating the Ir Anidachat as an idolatrous place. So it's to say that it's the setting aside of the yoke of heaven or the yoke of the Torah or something like that is also very interesting, because this Canaanite deity was always considered the rider of the clouds, someone who was in the heavens. I mean, there's just, you know, there's a lot of resonances here,
Yeah.
I think. And if we put it in that historical context, I think it does make some kind of basic sense of why you would be talking about it at all. So I just wanted to add in. It's not
Okay,
different.
thank you.
An additional way of looking at it.
Yeah. So the next three sources are not Jewish or not not Jewish sources.
Mainstream.
The first is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Right, so again, that's a Jewish but not rabbinic or not a mainstream Jewish source. You made Blial for the pit, angel of enmity. In darkness is his domain. His counsel is to bring about wickedness and guilt. All the spirits of his lot are angels of destruction. They walk in the laws of darkness. Towards it goes their only desires. That's from the War Scroll of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know enough about the Dead Sea Scrolls to say anything more than that.
But this sounds like it's an attempt to systematize and justify belief in this power of evil, which is, if potentially equal to the power of good, or pretty influential and powerful, and it's something which is way non-normative from the main tradition that we follow, but it survives because there were these schismatics who went off to the shores of the Dead Sea and had their library with the things that they considered important enough to believe and to preserve and to teach. And it's useful in linguistic ways and such things. But again, it's a strange body of things. It sounds like that people are having trouble culturally overcoming and getting rid of external other cultural values and such
Mhm.
that are not part of Judaism. So Avraham is a model of somebody who was raised in a very, very, very rich, specific culture in Bavel, in Mesopotamia. And the main marker of his life is that he leaves.
Right.
He goes away from that. And so it's an interesting thing. The power of the belief in netherworld, nether powers, magic, the zodiac, and so on. It's influential in all these human cultures, and Judaism is different
Yeah.
in some fundamental ways.
But this
Yeah.
is typical of apocalyptic literature, this kind of thinking.
Hmm.
Some of that
And
is
the
not.
wars are, and because they were so concerned about what was going on, they thought there was going to be the end of time. I have a copy of the scrolls in the other room. I mean, I can go and check the war scroll, but the war scroll is but considered by many to not necessarily apply to everybody at Qumran. Could be a smaller group who were highly messianic in the terms of several messiahs,
Uh-huh.
and this is typical of apocalyptic literature. This is not unusual.
Right. Right. So I think the whole question of what this term means becomes much more interested and complicated if we look a little bit further on in our parsha. The term Blial does occur in Tanakh, but in the Chumash it appears only twice, both in our parsha. So let's see the second occurrence. The English should be on your screen. This is from chapter 15. Kiebecha evyon me'achad achecha bechad sha'arecha ba'artzecha, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, lo ta'amet et levavcha v'lo tikpotz et yadcha me'achecha evyon. If there are poor, or when there are poor, from among your brethren in your cities, in the land which God gives you, you shall not be haughty, and you shall not withhold your hand from your impoverished brother. Ki patoach tiftach et yadcha lo, v'ha'avit ta'avitenu de mechsaro asher yechsar lo. Rather, you must open your hand for him, and you shall support him. Right? The Gemara reads this as de mechsaro asher yechsar lo, that you have to even support them to whatever standard of living they were used to living by before they became impoverished. So someone who was used, right? The example that the Gemara gives is someone who was used to having a chauffeur drive them around. You have to provide them a chauffeur to drive them around. Shamer lecha penye devar im livavcha blial leimur karva shnata sheva shnata shmita v'ra'a einecha b'achicha v'yon v'lo titain lo v'kara alecha el Hashem v'aya b'cha chet. Be very careful, lest there be a matter of blial in your heart. I'm not going to translate it at the moment. Lest there be a matter of blial in your heart, saying, the Shemitah year is approaching, and it will be bad in your eyes for your impoverished brother, and you won't give to him, and he will call out to you, and the sin will be upon you. Naton titain lo v'lo yeira levavcha b'titcha lo. You shall surely give him and not have a begrudging heart when you give to him. Ki biglal hadavar hazeh yivarechecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol ma'asecha v'chol mishlach yadcha. It's for this matter that God will bless you with all of your deeds and with everything that you do. Lo ki lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz al kein anochim etzavcha leimor patoch tiftach et yadcha lachicha laniecha ulevyoncha b'artzecha. There will never cease to be poverty amongst your brothers. Therefore, I command you to open your hands, open your arms to your impoverished brother and to the poor in your land. Okay, so with all that we've discussed so far, how are we supposed to translate the term blial in the verses we just read?
Hard to know.
The text itself that's on the screen, the translation, renders machshava blial as base thought,
Yeah,
nasty idea, um, an attitude which is to be rejected. It's an inclination that is not good.
right. So is it possible to read Blial as a noun in this passage, or do we have to read it as an adjective?
Hmm.
Machshevet ganavim. Both of the words in that phrase are nouns, but it means a thieving idea,
Yeah,
an idea of theft, and translations can be rendered variously. If you're too literal, it may in fact not be a good translation. So that it's a different part of speech or the same part of speech, it what the meaning might be or is understood to be. This is asking for a charitable heart, a generous heart, even when one is concerned, as that seventh year is approaching, is the challenge of being able to get through the year without planting and harvesting and so on. It's a dangerous time. Hopefully it'll be a blessed time, but it is natural that one would think about one's immediate family, immediate friends, acquaintances, somebody who's a cousin, somebody who's a former neighbor that you know and you meet. People make decisions.
yeah.
And this seems to be encouraging people to make the decisions as generously as they can, not as they feel.
Okay, so let's go on to the next source, which is the Rambam. In the laws of Matanot Aniyim, gifts to the poor, laws of tzedakah, the Rambam says, Kol ma'alim einav min hatzdaka, harei ze nikra blial. Whoever turns his eyes away from giving tzedakah is called blial. The English here translated as rebellious. I don't know if that's, I have no idea if that's an accurate translation or not. Kamosha nikra oved akum blial, just like an idolater is called blial. Uve akum hu omer, when it comes to idolatry, it says yatsu anashim b'nei blial. These people who are followers are characterized as blial. Uve ma'alim einav min staka hu omer hishamer lecha pen yelecha davar im levavcha blial. And when it comes to turning your eyes away from charity, he quotes our verse: "Be careful lest your heart has thoughts of blial." Okay. So the Rambam is using this as an essential character trait, character description. And let's skip over Rabbi Kasher for a moment and go to the final two sources in our packet, which are two Gemaras. The first one from Bava Batra says as follows. And this actually connects really interestingly to the learning session that Danny Epstein led this past Shabbos afternoon, I think. Rav Papa hava salik bidarga ishtamit kare ba'e lemipil. Rav Papa's was once climbing a ladder, his foot slipped, and he almost fell. Okay, a near accident. Amar Hashta, Kaini Chayev Man Desane Lan Kimechalale Shabbatot Ovde Avoda Zara. Says he speaks about himself in a disparaging way, but he says, I must be like someone who desecrates Shabbos or who worships idolatry. Amar Lechia Bar Rav Midifti Rav Papa. So Rav Chia, who was there or heard of this story, says to Rav Papa, the one who had the near miss, Shema ani bali yadcha velo pirnasto. Maybe this happened to you because a poor person came to you and you didn't give them tzedakah. Ditanya, and why would that be the cause for your almost accident? Because Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha teaches, Kol hama'alim einav min hatzdaka ki ilu oved avodah zara. Whoever turns their eyes away from tzedakah, it's as if they worshipped idolatry. Ketiv hacha hishamer lecha pen yeh davar im levavcha blial. It says concerning tzedakah, be very careful lest your heart have thoughts of blial. Uchtiv hatam yatsu anashim b'nei blial. It says by the Ir Hanidachat that there are people of blial who have come. Malahalam avodah zara, afkan avodah zara. So just as in the Ir Hanidachat it's talking about idolatry, so too when it comes to tzedakah, it's somehow comparable to idolatry. Would we describe this Gemara as a literal interpretation or a bit of a stretch?
Stretch?
It seems like a stretch to me, right? You know, you're looking, right? It relates to to Danny's session, because, you know, does God really cause every single detail in our life to happen? So if you're looking for that explanation, that approach, so you could find it. What if that's the literal meaning of the pasuk? I'm not sure. But then we come to the Gemara in Ketubot, which makes a very, it makes the exact same comparison, but it says as follows. Hainu de Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, "Bo'u v'nachazik tova la rama'in." Let's appreciate or hold in high esteem swindlers. Why? Hainu she'im alehen hainu chotin b'chol yom. If not for the swindlers, then we would be guilty of sinning every day. Shene'emar v'kara alecha el Hashem v'haya b'cha chet. As it says, when the poor person calls out to you, to God, and the sin is upon you. V'tani Rabbi Chia bar Rav midifti, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, and now we're going to quote the same exact thing. We quote in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, Mali meinav min tzedakah ki ilu oved avodah zara. Whoever turns their eyes away from giving tzedakah, it's as if they worship idolatry. Ketiv hacha yishamer lecha pen yelecha davar im levavcha blial. It says when it comes to tzedakah, be careful lest your heart have thoughts of blial. Uchtiv hatam yatsu anashim b'nei blial, and it says there that people, followers of Blial, or characterized as Blial, have come in and enticed us to worship idolatry. Malahalan avodah zara, afkan avodah zara. Just like over there it's talking about idolatry, so here it's talking about idolatry.
So that's the instruction to not ignore shluchim.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, so how
In
did
fact, I think Rabbi Shafran, he didn't say exactly that, but he said essentially that.
How do the swindlers connect to this?
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the beginning of the Gemara passage. Right, he says we should be thankful for the swindlers that live among us.
They're not there's some that are not appropriate to give tzedakah for, and therefore we give tzedakah to anyone that's there.
So he's saying the opposite, right? You're giving a very charitable read of the situation. Excuse the pun, but he's saying the opposite. Because there are swindlers, therefore we cannot be held accountable if we don't give tzedakah to whoever asks. Because there's a chance that the person asking is a swindler, so therefore we are right, or we have the right to be skeptical, and therefore we don't have to give. And if we refuse, so therefore we haven't committed a sin. But if there were no swindlers,
but I still think that what it's teaching is that we do give tzedakah to anybody that comes.
So that's the way it should be interpreted, right? That's what we should do with it. But he's saying, if you ever said no, right? If it weren't for the swindlers, then we would all be sinners.
Mhm.
What doesn't mean we would all be sinners. It means because we don't give money.
Hmm.
Well,
I'm
there's a
guilty of it
difference.
too.
There's a difference between a person who comes to the door who has already been interrogated by some member of the Baltimore base dean or whatever the organization is. I'm sorry,
They've
I don't
shown
know
papers, yeah.
exactly. And they have their papers with
Right.
them. And somebody else who's standing on a street corner who you think probably is not that far from the liquor store or probably not that far from a drug dealer
Okay.
who's asked, I mean, let's not equate all the people who ask us for money. I mean,
Yeah,
the-
I definitely hear it. So the question is, do you think that these two Gemaras, the Gemara from Bava Batra about Rav Papa's foot slipping, and this Gemara from Ketubot, should we read these exactly the same?
With Rav Papa's foot slipping and so on, the attempt to give higher meaning to an act of either carelessness or clumsiness. Everything has meaning and it's being elevated.
Right.
And by taking on the role of a sinner himself, he's in effect suggesting that he's deserving of punishment because he did not live up to the values he teaches and promotes and says that he wants people to follow. There's an occasion when one slips, and rather than denying it or using the opportunity to say, it was greasy or it was this or it was that, I need to be a better person and more careful about these matters of the poor, the needy, and so on. I came in a little bit late, so I don't know what the etymology of that word Blial was done, but I would like to suggest one, Blial,
Yeah, we saw
without
that.
the possibility of rising.
We saw that. We saw that.
Yeah.
And if somebody who almost falls to his death but manages to
interesting.
survive, is blessed with that, he's worried and he's looking
Interesting.
and checking, like if something bad happens, check the mezuzahs just in case.
Right.
You find that it needs to be fixed, then you've done something good as a kind of atonement, a good thing as to what is being done.
Okay. I wanted to point out one more thing. And again, this is sort of, I'll leave us with some food for thought because I haven't figured out the exact application or significance of this, but it did strike me as quite interesting if we go back to source number 1, that these people that are seducing or enticing the city to worship idolatry are described as anashim b'nei Blial, literally people, the sons of Blial. And we saw it might mean that they're followers of the devil or of some demonic force or something, or it might mean that they're they're immoral people, they're scoundrels, however we're going to interpret it. But then the very next section in the Torah opens with the phrase Banim atem lahashem Elokeichem. You are the sons of God. Okay, so we have the contrast between B'nai Blial, these unscrupulous people or devil worshippers, idolaters, whatever it is, in contrast with you, the Jewish people, B'nai Yisrael, are the sons of God. Which again, there's got to be more to say about the juxtaposition of these two things. I don't know exactly what that thing is to say, but I think that it is, it's screaming out to me in the way that the Torah presents these two things. Right? You are the children of God. Am kadosh ata Hashem Elokecha, bachar ubecha bachar Hashem liot lo la'am segula mikol amim asher pnei hadama. You are a holy people to God, and God has chosen you to be his treasured nation among all the people or nations of the world. So we have the contrast between these B'nai Blial, these followers or people that are characterized as Blial, with what we should be, which is the children of God, God's sons. So anyway, this was a little bit of a different, got a little bit more academic than we typically do. And I found it really interesting to just explore what this odd phrase means. Or does anyone have any final questions or thoughts on anything we did tonight?
I think in general that the Torah tries to be gentle and tries to cover the horrible or difficult things. This is just seems to be always the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that some of what we found here is along those lines.
Well, I see it as Canaanite. I mean, this is an Amorite practice, and this is what Rashi says, and this is what the scrolls of the Ugarit actually show, that they did things like this. So this isn't an attempt to take another potentially Canaanite practice and set them up against one another. I think that's where I see the connection here too, and that the life that Moshe Rabbeinu is presenting to them is one that is filled with the love of God for their children. The Baal was in charge of producing the wheat and the food that people would have, but they did not exactly excel in sharing it with one another, I'll tell you. They just didn't. So this notion of selfishness or something as a trait fits in with that. There are a lot of things that actually fit in with these ideas,
Mm-hmm.
but I think people on a definitely downward trajectory, that's the way I'm thinking of it, that are heading in the wrong direction. That's another way simply to translate it, and it kind of takes into account the etymology of the word, I think, a little bit better, so we remember it maybe that way. I don't know.
Okay, very nice, very interesting. All right, well, thank you everyone for enhancing our understanding or confusion, whichever it led to, over this, and hope you have a great rest of the week. I'll see everyone hopefully in Shul on Shabbos, and meet you again back on Zoom next Tuesday night.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So much,
All right.
Robert. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Oh, we finally can see Lou.
Hi.